Every time a software project fails, someone is blamed. Sometimes it is the developers, sometimes the project managers, sometimes the client itself, and sometimes the technology. After spending many years in software consulting, working with startups, SMEs, Fortune 500 companies, I have realized something. Software projects rarely fail because of one person. They fail because of a series of decisions, small assumptions, poor communication, and sometimes because everyone thought someone else was responsible. Today, I want to talk about why software project really fails and why it's rarely just the code. Hi, I am Naveen. I'm technology consultant, entrepreneur, and someone who has spent more than 2 decades helping businesses turn ideas into software. Over the years, I have worked with startups, enterprise, and teams across different industries. And this podcast is where I share the lessons, challenges, and the conversations that do not really make happen into the project meetings. The biggest myth. I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about software development is software equals to coding. It does not. Coding is incredibly important. Without good developers, there is no software. But software is much bigger than code. Before software developers even begin coding, someone has to understand the business. Someone has to gather the requirements. Someone has to design the experience. Someone has to think about architecture. Somebody has to think about security as well. Performance, testing, deployment, maintenance, documentation. And not only then does development begin. Great software is never built by one brilliant developer. It is built by a great team. Yes, developers can absolutely cause failure. Now, before anyone says you are just defending developers, let me stop you there. Developers absolutely contribute to project failure. I have seen projects suffer because of poor coding practices, lack of testing, weak architecture, copy-paste programming, ignoring security, and perhaps the biggest one, not asking enough questions. Sometimes developers become so focused on developing features that they stop understanding the business behind those features. Why do they need that feature? Technically, depth is real. Bad code is real. Poor engineering decisions are real. And they absolutely cost companies money. So yes, developers carry responsibilities, but that they are usually one part of much bigger picture. Now let me give you some real cases. Okay, imagine a retail. I would not take any client's name, but I would give you metaphor for those. Okay, imagine a retail company called North Star Retail. Okay, they approach software company and say we want an app like Amazon. Everyone get excited, right? Developers start thinking about technology, architects start preparing the architecture of the system, designers start creating beautiful screens, and 6 months later, the application is ready. Wow, beautiful UI, excellent performance, clean code, stable infrastructure, everything works perfectly, except almost nobody uses it. Why? Because the real problem was not that they needed another Amazon. Their customers simply wanted better inventory visibility and faster order tracking. The software team built exactly what was requested, right? Instead of discovering what was actually needed. That's not a coding failure. That's a discovery failure. Requirements are everything. I have learned something over the years. Developers are incredibly problem solvers, right? But they can only solve the problems they understand. If requirements are incomplete or constantly changing, or based on assumptions, even the best engineering team will struggle. Software development is one of the few industries where missing information can cost months of work. Assumptions become bugs, misunderstanding becomes change request, and poor communication becomes project delays. Communication. Think about everyone involved in a software project. Client thinks about business, designer thinks about experience, developer thinks about implementations, QA thinks about edge cases, DevOps thinks about deployment, security team thinks about risk. Everyone is solving the same problem, but from different perspectives. The moment these conversations stops, the projects start moving into a different directions. Here's the next second use case, just one small change. If you have worked in software, you have definitely heard this sentence, it's just a small feature, right? Imagine a logistic company called Bright Logic, right? They are 2 weeks away from the launch, but CEO calls up and says, okay Naveen, can we just allow customers to edit an order after it has been submitted? Sounds simple, huh? One button, one screen, maybe a day or two, right? Not really. Here is the story. That one small changes affects inventory, database, invoices, Notifications, warehouse operations, mobile apps, QA, documentation, deployment, and suddenly 5 different teams are involved. The launch gets delayed, the feature was not working at all. It was wrong, right? The feature was not wrong, but the assumption that it was small was wrong. Important topic, AI. Today everyone is talking about AI. AI writes code, AI creates documentation, AI designs beautiful interfaces, AI helps with testing, and honestly, it's incredible. I love AI. I use AI almost every day. But here is something AI still cannot do. AI cannot replace clear thinking. If nobody understands the business problem, AI won't imaginically discover it, right? If requirements are unclear, AI simply generates unclear solutions faster. Technology changes every year. Human communication still matters just as much. Another use case, when developers were part of the problem. Now let's look at the another side. Imagine a fintech startup called NovaPay. Okay, investors are waiting. Marketing has announced the launch date. Everyone is under tremendous pressure. The engineering team decides to skip code reviews, reduce testing, and postpone fixing technical debt until version 2. The product launches. 3 days later after the launch, customers started reporting payment failures. Now the team spent weeks fixing production issues instead of building new features. Was this developer failure or developer's fault? Partially, they made technical decisions that increased risk, but the pressure came from the unrealistic deadlines, business expectations, and the lack of healthy conversations about quality. Again, it was not one person's mistake, it was a system. I often compare software delivery to a relay race, right? Sales hands over to business analysis hands over to design hands over to development hands over to QA hands over to DevOps, and everyone hands off matters, right? If everyone drops the baton, the whole team loses, right? Okay. Nobody wins because one department performs brilliantly. Software succeeds when everyone succeeds together. Next use case, when one question saved the project. Now let me tell you my favorite kind of story. Imagine a healthcare company called MediConnect, right? The team is reviewing requirements for an online patient registration system. Everything looks good. Everyone is ready to start development. Then one developer raises one simple question. What happens if a patient loses internet connectivity while submitting the forms? Silence. Nobody had considered it, right? That one question changes the design. That one question now brings a new feature. We have to have a save local draft copy. It's a new feature evolved, right? Patients can continue where they left off. Development takes a few extra days, but after launch, thousands of users avoid frustration. Sometimes the most valuable thing a developer contributes is not the code, it is the curiosity. Okay, so question comes, what successful projects have in common? When I look back at the best project I have been fortunate to work on, they were not always the biggest, right? They were not always the most expensive. They were not always built on top technology. They simply had something else. People communicated, questions were encouraged, problems were discussed early, risks were not hidden, clients stayed involved, developers challenged assumptions. Everyone understood that success was not someone else's responsibility, it was a teamwork. It belonged to the entire team. Okay, so question comes, can developer cause projects to fail? Absolutely. Can architects contribute? Absolutely. Project managers? Of course. Business analysts? Definitely. Client? Yes. Software projects do not fail because one person made one mistake. They fail when communication breaks down, when assumptions replace conversations, right? When deadlines become more important than quality, when people stop asking questions, and when teams forget that software is built by people, not programming languages. Okay. So if there is one lesson software has taught me, it is this. Great software does not start with great code. It starts with great conversations, understanding the business, challenging assumptions, building trust, and making sure everyone is solving the same problem before anyone writes the first line of code. If you have ever worked on a software project, I would love to hear your experience. What do you think is the biggest reason software project fails? Was it technology, communication, leadership, changing requirements, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's learn from each other. Thank you for watching. I see you in the next episode.